Hey, well, hopefully we'll finish this thing today. I've got 7 minutes left, and we will see. I'll try not to talk too much. But before we begin, I just wanted to say, for those of you who did not like the style of this video series, they thought I should have listened to the whole thing because, it was much better than I let on when I was just responding, and how it's not right to just respond without listening to the entire thing. I'm almost through this, and I don't really see any redeeming qualities towards the end of this. So after I'm done, if you could specifically let me know what you feel like I misrepresented in the earlier videos when you were telling me that I was misrepresenting it, that would be very helpful to me. And I'm not trying to be tongue-in-cheek. It really would be helpful to me because I don't understand what you were saying. Now, again, I've got about 7 minutes left in this, and so we'll see. Maybe I will understand after this video. But I have a sneaking suspicion that I won't. And so if I don't, please, in the comment section, let me know specifically where you think I misrepresented John Piper. I appreciate that. That would be very helpful to me personally, and I think everyone who reads the comment section of my channel. Anyway, let's get started.
Well, for two people to ask the same question and come to radically different answers. So labeling someone on the basis of their questions is careless at best and possibly slander.
Yeah, so we actually did talk about this, and I'm gonna turn the speed back up to 1.25 because I cannot take this anymore. He just speaks way too slow. But yeah, we talked about this last time. Obviously nobody gets called a critical race theorist for just asking questions. And we talked about how John Piper said farewell to Rob Bell, and all Rob Bell was doing was asking questions. But of course, we know that's not all he was doing. Lots of progressives ask questions, but really are putting forward a narrative, and they want you to believe it. And so he's right. Of course, asking questions doesn't mean you're a critical theorist, but that's tilting at windmills. Nobody really does that. Let's just be honest about that.
So my first biblical relational principle that I'm pleading for is Christians should be careful not to slander a fellow Christian by the careless use of pejorative labels like critical race theory.
Okay, sure. We will be careful not to slander people, but I do not grant to you the ability to determine the difference between slander and not slander. This entire video, you have shown that you can't do that. You've called things slander that aren't slander, and you've thrown suspicion and shade of the charge of slander towards all kinds of people who do not slander. So yes, you're right. Christians shouldn't slander. I don't know what kind of tremendous insight that's supposed to be, but it has no relevance here. Thank you very much, John, for that.
Now here's number second, and there are only two. When a Christian brother is honestly analyzing and exposing false beliefs or unbiblical ways of thinking, say in critical race theory, we should not silence or denounce the brother by pointing to blood in the streets. Now, the biblical principle behind this is Romans 12:4. In one body, we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. That's the biblical principle. Now, I am not saying that Rasul Berry did this, that he pulled rank in that way and tried to silence his conversation partner, Neil Shenvi. I'm not saying he did that. He didn't do that. But I want to
I'm definitely not saying anything specific here, guys. I know that would be the responsible thing to do so you could check my facts and all that stuff. But I'm definitely not saying anything specific. We understand that, John. I mean, let's just be honest. Like I've said many times, that's just part of Big Eva's MO. They do not say specific things. They do not name names pretty much at all. We get it. We got it.
Address this because that is the way he will be criticized. Berry will be criticized when he says, for example, the church is being brought ethical concerns and is responding with epistemological critique. Like a man who tells you he's bleeding, and you ask, well, how did you come to that conclusion? People are going to criticize that kind of statement, first because it's an overstatement, which it is. Everybody uses overstatement, as if the whole church is doing nothing but epistemology in response to the ethical issue of our time. And second, because people will hear that statement as shutting down all intellectual wrestling with false ideas, which are upstream from the deadly effects they may have in the streets.
Yikes! This is really This is really manipulative of John Piper. And I do not say that lightly. This is a manipulation. Because nobody would accuse Razul Berry of shutting down all conversation of false doctrine by pointing to the blood in the streets. But he is most certainly shutting down this conversation by pointing to blood in the streets. Because we actually need to figure out whether or not the man is bleeding. He's coming to you saying he's bleeding, but you look at his hand, it's like, it's completely intact. How do you know you're bleeding? So that actually does need to be discussed. And Razul, like all social justice warriors attempt to do, they try to beat you into submission by saying, how dare you ask me how I'm bleeding? Can't you see? And you're looking at it, you're like, no, I can't see. And they say, well, that just demonstrates you're part of the white supremacist conspiracy. That's what happens. That's what they do. It's called white fragility. You deny this, you want to find out more? Well, that's just your white fragility showing. Like, this is well known. And so this is super manipulative of John Piper. What he said is technically true. Of course, Razul isn't trying to address to stop all discussion of false doctrine, but he most certainly is attempting to shut down the conversation of how you are using critical theory to bring me this ethical concern. I can see that your hand is not bleeding, so you must be using some kind of foreign ideology. Let's talk about that. He's like, no, I'm bleeding. This is super manipulative of John Piper. Wow, this gets worse and worse and worse. I'm probably not going to do the second video. Let's just be honest. I don't see any value in it. I mean, it's a mixture of truisms that nobody denies, like don't slander people, okay? And then it's a mixture of that and then these manipulations. Pastor Razul most certainly was doing what he's saying Pastor Razul was not doing.
Instead of silencing or denouncing someone who is wrestling with the intellectual or theoretical or epistemological roots of false beliefs and unbiblical thinking, let's give each other some room to be different in the way we attack the same evil. For example,
no, you can't have room in that way because we're not even sure that there's an evil because we're being brought charges of a systemic white supremacist conspiracy. And we're looking at the data. We're looking at your hand. It's not bleeding. And we're like, prove it. And you're like, I'm bleeding. He's doing the exact thing that you're saying should not be done and pretending like he's not doing it. Pastor Razul was definitely doing that. He was definitely doing that. He was definitely doing that. I mean, Pastor John, like, I can't, does he just not see? I mean, maybe he just doesn't see. But either way, this is a manipulation, a huge manipulation.
COVID-19 is a killer. One person is fighting it in the research laboratory 18 hours a day. Another person is fighting it as a doctor or a nurse on the ground
Yikes.
with his hands in the blood in the intensive care unit. Another person is a politician doing his best to discern what policies might hinder the spread of this disease. Another person is giving people guidance and hope with biblical interpretations of God's providence and trying to comfort
Do you
those who've
see
lost.
what he's done here? This is wicked, my friends. He's saying everyone has different functions in the body. Everyone does different things. Some approach it from a science perspective. Some are first responders. Some are politicians. And this is true and right and good. Not everybody has to be the tip of the spear. Not everybody has to do a video about how John Piper is manipulating you during critical race theory. That's not everybody's role. I get it. We all get it. But COVID-19, I think most people would agree, it's a real thing. It is a thing. People do get sick from COVID-19, right? Whatever it is. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know exactly what it is, but people are getting sick and some people are dying, right? And so that's a fact. That's just a fact of life. We deal with this sickness just like we've dealt with sicknesses for millennia, right? Sicknesses are real. But the thing is, like this systemic racist white supremacy conspiracy theory, it's not even worthy of being called a conspiracy theory because it's obviously fantasy. It's a fantasy. And so we're being told, well, everyone has a different role fighting this fantasy. So let Pastor Razul have his fantasy role, I guess. That's very different. It's a big manipulation, and it's very hard to understand why he would do this. All right, I was just informed by my wife that my new computer is here. I got it on a Black Friday deal. It's going to be very good for the channel. And so let's wrap this up.
Loved ones, and how mistaken it would be for the doctor with his hands in the blood, risking his life in the intensive care unit, to say to the researcher who has never touched a diseased person, stop wasting your time in the laboratory and get out here where the suffering is and get your hands dirty, for goodness sakes. And the same is true for racism. Most Christians realize
No, it isn't.
that belittling
No,
or disrespect...
No, it isn't. The same is not true for racism. This is all a fantasy. This is all a fantasy, because while we all agree that racism exists, we do not agree that there's a vast white supremacist conspiracy that infects every area of life. Even if you can't detect it, it's still there. We're being told to believe that there's no evidence of this systemic racism, but you know it's there because Jamar Tisby told me, after all. And it's like, well, we have no evidence that George Floyd was killed by a racist white cop, but just believe it and stop asking me how I know I'm bleeding. That is not something that we can do as Christians, because regardless of the fact that every Christian has a different role, every Christian is also bound to not bear false witness against their neighbor, to not allow a justice to be, fake justice to be doled out without the evidence of two or more witnesses. We have to have due process. We have to do all these things. Every Christian is bound to that, regardless of if you're a lawyer or if you're a bricklayer. So no, John, no.
Or hating or rejecting or hindering the success of someone simply because of their race is evil. One Christian might...
Right, that's true, but we're not sure that that's happening in all of the areas that Pastor Razul is saying that it's happening. So we have to actually get to the bottom of that first. And Pastor Razul is saying, no, this is an ethical concern. You can't ask me how I know. Like that's this is a manipulation, man. Guys, we've got 3 minutes left, and I was told that I was misrepresenting John, that he was really dead on this. Please let me know what I'm missing here, because I don't see it.
That evil in the street, another in the courts, another as a mother raising loving and respectful children, another as an academic historian unfolding the way race was constructed as an instrument of oppression, another preaching his heart out the whole counsel of God, trying to overcome the racism in his congregation, and another critiquing critical race theory precisely because he believes it is not a biblical path to justice and love, but a destructive path. So my second biblical relational principle, then, is that we not silence or denounce one strategy of love by exalting another. That we not say there's blood in the streets, therefore intellectual critiques of critical race theory are not a priority right now, nor that we say demolishing critical race theory is such a priority that putting a tourniquet on a bleeding man in the street is irrelevant to the great struggles of our time. Brothers.
I mean, there's no... I can't even think of how to respond to that. That is the most preposterous statement that I've ever heard in my entire life. We can't stop a man from bleeding in the street with a tourniquet because of critical race theory. We have to fight critical race theory first. That's so disconnected from the reality of what's been happening in the evangelical church regarding critical race theory over the last 2 years, that it has to be intentional. This has to be an intentional obfuscation. I know that's a big charge, but I do not think that Pastor John is that naive or that stupid or that uninformed. Maybe he is, and that's even worse, that he dare talk about something that he's that uninformed about.
We don't need to do this to each other.
I hate...
There are...
Yeah, well, he uses the crying voice. I hate that. When he's trying to really twist your arm, brothers. Like that works when you're actually speaking truth. I love that when you're speaking truth. But when you're lying through your teeth and then pretending to weep on camera, be ashamed of yourself.
Are tens of thousands of pastors right now who are not trying to tether critical race theory to every black lover of justice. And there are critics of critical race theory who believe with all their heart, and rightly, that there are aspects of critical race theory that are destructive to love and justice and racial harmony, so that their investment in criticizing critical race theory is not a detour away from the problem of racism, but an effort to destroy it. So
that is
next time,
every single person who criticizes critical race theory. They all believe that. Every single one.
in the next episode, I will try to say, what in the world is it?
No, thank you.
What is critical
No,
race
thank you,
theory?
John. I'm not interested in that.
And why is it so controversial? But for now, I am making two pleas from my heart to my brothers and sisters in the faith, and I'll just mention them as we close in reverse order this time. When a Christian brother is honest...
I think I'm done with this. So, guys, he's just going to repeat himself here, so there's not going to be anything new in the last minute or so. But, what am I missing, guys? What am I missing? I was told that I was misrepresenting, and I needed to hear him out in his entirety before I knew what he was going to say. That wasn't true. I knew exactly what he was going to say from the beginning before I heard it. And so it's like, it's tilting at windmills, it's saying truisms, it's manipulating what's actually happened in this controversy, it's saying that you shouldn't do something that Pastor Razul definitely did, and then saying Pastor Razul didn't do it. Like, why are you trying to gaslight us like this, man? Like, this is gaslighting to the highest degree. I just don't even get it. I don't even get why you would even do this if you just are so obviously uninformed. I mean, you're either uninformed or you're lying here. And I know that you're lying at some points in this. We've covered that in the previous videos, but man, this is bad. This is really bad. Guys, those of you who are criticizing my earlier videos, I'm not trying to put you on blast or anything like that. I'm not trying to gloat and say I told you so, but like, this is me saying I must be missing something. Please let me know how I misrepresented what John said in this podcast. I don't see it. This was horrendous. I can't imagine why anyone would find this gobbledygook helpful. And then you throw in a few fake tears at the end to really drive your point home. I hate that with a passion. When you're crying over misrepresentations and lies, man, that's really something. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. I'm gonna go play with my new computer and see if I can get it set up today and all that. God bless.